Maya Chen stood alone at the viewport, watching alien dignitaries swirl around the reception hall. The massive space station, Unity, hung against the backdrop of stars, humanity's newest foothold in a galaxy that barely tolerated them. She straightened her simple diplomat's uniform, took a deep breath, and stepped into the crowd. The air smelled strange. A mix of different atmospheres adjusted to accommodate the various species. Some aliens floated above the ground, others slithered across polished floors, while many walked on 2, 4, or 6 legs. Maya moved carefully between groups, nodding respectfully as she passed. This was her first official function, though no one knew her true identity. Admiral Maya Chen, newly appointed human representative to the Coalition's High Command, had chosen to arrive a day early, dressed as a junior diplomat. She wanted to see how aliens truly behave toward humans when they thought no high-ranking officials were watching. So far, the results were disappointing but not surprising. A group of blue-skinned Arvani turned their backs when she approached. A floating glimmer sphere dimmed its lights when she passed nearby, their species equivalent of a frown. Maya kept her face neutral, absorbing everything, remembering everything. Humans still smell of smoke and primitive fuels. She overheard a tall, insect-like Crix saying to its companion, their planet was nearly destroyed 3 times by their own hands. The companion clicked its mandibles in what might have been laughter. And now they want to help manage galactic affairs. They should remain in their own system for another century at least. Maya moved toward the refreshment area where various compatible foods and drinks were arranged by species type. She selected a simple water, not trusting alien beverages without proper research. As she turned from the table, a tall Vazarian officer stepped directly into her path. Vazarians were reptilian, standing nearly 7 feet tall with iridescent scales in shades of green and gold. This one wore elaborate armor covered in ceremonial markings indicating high military rank. "Excuse me," Maya said politely, stepping to the side to pass. The Vazarian purposely shifted to block her path. "You should watch where you're going, human." Maya blinked in confusion. She hadn't been walking when he approached her. "I was standing still, sir." "Excuse me, human," the Vazarian officer hissed, scales glinting under the lights. "You've spilled your drink on my ceremonial armor." Maya looked down at her sealed water container, then at his pristine armor. She hadn't spilled anything. "I'm sorry, but—" Silence. The reptilian alien raised his voice, drawing attention. "This is why humans don't belong here. Barely out of their atmosphere, and they think they deserve a seat at our table." The room fell silent as heads turned toward the confrontation. Maya felt dozens of alien eyes focusing on her, some curious, some amused, none appearing sympathetic. "I assure you, I didn't." Maya tried again. "Your species can barely manage peace on your own planet," the Vazarian continued loudly. "How do you expect to contribute to galactic stability? You bring nothing of value to this coalition." A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered aliens. Maya noted which species nodded along with the Vazarian's words. The Crix, the Multarians, even the usually diplomatic Felrani seemed to be watching with approval. "I apologize if there was a misunderstanding," Maya said carefully. "There is no misunderstanding. Your presence here is the mistake." The Vazarian leaned closer, towering over her. Primitive creatures playing at diplomacy. Maya's face burned with humiliation, but she kept her expression controlled. Years of military training had prepared her for much worse than public insults. What bothered her most wasn't the Vazarian's behavior, but the fact that not a single other species stepped forward to defend basic courtesy. She looked around the room, mentally recording every face, every reaction. This was exactly why she had come incognito. To see the truth before protocol and pretense could hide it. The Vazarian, apparently satisfied with his public display, finally stepped aside. "Stay out of important affairs, human. Return to your quarters and leave diplomacy to evolved species." Maya nodded slightly, neither accepting his words nor challenging them. As she walked away, she could hear conversations resuming. many discussing the human problem, as if she couldn't hear them perfectly well. She found a quiet corner of the reception hall and took a small sip of water. Her communicator vibrated silently against her wrist, a message from Earth Command confirming tomorrow's formal introduction ceremony, the official debut of Admiral Chen to the Coalition's High Command. The Vazrian didn't know she was Admiral Chen, newly appointed human representative to the Coalition's High Command, traveling undercover to see the true face of alien relations. He would learn tomorrow. They all would. Maya smiled slightly, already planning her approach. Humans may be newcomers to the galactic stage, but they had learned many lessons through their troubled history. Perhaps the most important was that respect was earned, not given freely. And tomorrow, she would begin earning it. The grand chamber of Unity Station sparkled under the lights of 1,000 stars visible through its massive transparent dome. The room had been designed to impress, with soaring ceilings and materials gathered from 100 worlds. Today it was filled to capacity with representatives from every species in the Galactic Coalition. The ceremony to welcome new High Command appointees happened only once per standard year. Species that had been part of the Coalition for centuries took these events seriously, using them to display their importance through elaborate costumes and entourages. The human delegation, in contrast, appeared simple and understated. They wore matching navy blue uniforms with minimal decoration, standing together in a tight group near the entrance. Most alien dignitaries ignored them completely. A deep tone sounded 3 times, signaling the start of the ceremony. The Chamber Elder, an ancient Peltorian whose crystalline form caught and reflected light in dazzling patterns, floated to the center platform. "We gather today to welcome those who will guide our shared future," the Elder began, voice resonating through the chamber. "Representatives who have proven their worth to join our High Command." One by one, new appointees were called forward. A Moltarian fire sage, twin Krix scientists, a Felrani ambassador. Each received polite applause as their accomplishments were listed. The Vazrian delegation sat prominently in the front row, their chief commander nodding approvingly at each new appointee. Among them sat the officer from yesterday, his scales polished to a high shine, apparently confident that the human embarrassment had been forgotten. Finally, the Elder paused and consulted a data tablet. And now the Elder announced, voice carrying clearly, representing Earth and all human territories, "We welcome their chosen leader." A murmur of mild surprise ran through the chamber. Most had expected humans to be recognized last, as the newest member species. Introducing Admiral Maya Chen, Earth's appointed representative to the High Command. The announcement echoed through Unity Station's grand chamber. Maya walked confidently to the podium in her full dress uniform, medals glinting under the lights. Gone was the simple diplomat's attire from yesterday, replaced by the unmistakable regalia of humanity's highest military rank. The Vazrian officer from yesterday froze, scales paling to a sickly white, his head swiveled to track Maya's movement, jaw slightly open in shock. Those seated near him edged away slightly, sensing his sudden distress. "Thank you for the warm welcome," Maya said, her voice steady and strong. "Some of you I've already met, in interesting circumstances." Her eyes found the Vazrian, who seemed to shrink into himself. Several aliens turned to look at him, confused by Maya's pointed remark and his obvious discomfort. "Humanity may be new to the stars, but we bring something unique to this coalition, something I believe you need." Maya activated the display podium, and 3-dimensional images appeared in the air around her. The first showed Earth, scared, but healing from centuries of environmental damage. "We nearly destroyed ourselves," Maya acknowledged. "Many of you know this history and consider it a weakness, but surviving our mistakes taught us valuable lessons." She displayed human achievements, conflict resolution techniques used to end centuries-old conflicts, adaptive technologies developed under resource constraints, creative solutions to problems other species considered impossible. "We learn to work with what we have, not what we wish we had," Maya continued. "When faced with crisis, Humans don't simply follow established protocols. We adapt. Next came images of human diplomatic missions to dozens of worlds, including several that had previously rejected coalition membership. We respect tradition, but we aren't bound by it, Maya said. We question. We reimagine. We rebuild. The chamber had grown surprisingly quiet. Even those who had dismissed humans as unimportant were watching with increased interest. Most importantly, we understand what it means to be underestimated. Maya's gaze swept the room before returning briefly to the Vazarian officer, who now seemed to be trying to disappear into his seat. We know how it feels to be judged not by our capabilities, but by others' perceptions. She changed the display to show Unity Station itself, a marvel of collaborative engineering from 20 different species. We don't seek dominance. We seek partnership. Those who underestimate us miss the opportunity to discover what we can accomplish together. Maya stepped away from the podium but remained standing tall. I look forward to working with each of you for our shared future. My door is always open to every species, regardless of how long they've been among the stars. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some aliens leaned toward each other in heated conversation, while others approached the human delegation with new interest. The Vazarian chief commander was staring at his subordinate with obvious questions in his eyes. The officer who had humiliated Maya tried to explain something in hushed tones, gesturing apologetically. Maya moved through the crowd, accepting greetings and introduction requests from species that had previously ignored humans entirely. She smiled, shook hands or tentacles, and bowed to those who preferred it, demonstrating knowledge of each species' customs. Not once did she approach or acknowledge the Vazarian officer directly. The snub was obvious to everyone. The Vazarian officer slipped away from the ceremony early, humiliated not by Maya's revenge, but by her refusal to acknowledge his existence at all. As the reception continued, Maya found herself approached by the Vazarian chief commander. "Admiral Chen," he said formally, "I believe one of my officers may have behaved inappropriately toward you yesterday." Maya smiled diplomatically. "Yesterday I was simply observing, Commander. Today we begin our real work together. Shall we focus on that instead?" The commander's eyes widened slightly in surprise, then he nodded with new respect. "Indeed we shall, Admiral. Indeed we shall." The attack came without warning. One moment, Unity Station was functioning normally, the massive artificial habitat spinning peacefully against the backdrop of stars. The next moment, darkness seemed to spread across the viewing ports like spilled ink, blotting out the stars themselves. "Proximity alert. Call the sensor officer. Unknown vessels approaching from Sector 7. Admiral Maya Chen had been on Unity Station for 3 weeks now, slowly building relationships with other species and earning grudging respect from most. She had been reviewing supply reports in her office when the first alarm sounded. "Visual confirmation," announced the station's eye. "Shroud vessels detected." A chill ran through the command center. The Shroud, mysterious enemies who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, were rarely seen but universally feared. Their ships absorbed light rather than reflected it, appearing as moving voids against space. Their attacks were swift and devastating, leaving few survivors and no communications. Level 1 alert. All personnel to emergency stations. Maya rushed to the command center, joining other high command members already gathering there. Screens showed the approaching Shroud ships, 3 larger vessels, and dozens of smaller attack craft, all moving with terrible purpose toward the station. "Defensive shield grid activating," reported a Crix technician, multiple limbs working controls simultaneously. "Weapon systems online." The station's outer defensive ring lit up, energy barriers forming a protective shell around the habitat. For a moment, it seemed the standard defenses might hold. Then the Shroud did something new. The lead vessel released a pulse of energy unlike anything recorded before. Where it touched the shield grid, systems simply stopped working. Not damage, just dead, as if the technology itself had been erased. Alarms blared throughout Unity Station as the shroud breached the outer defenses. "Shield sectors 1 through 7 down," shouted a Felrani officer. "They're through the first layer." "Deploy secondary defenses," ordered the Vazrian chief commander. "Follow containment protocol Beta 9. All systems failing," a technician shouted. "Defensive protocols not responding." The command center descended into chaos. The advanced alien species, so confident in their superiority, followed protocols that were rapidly failing. Each species shouted orders to their own kind, contradicting each other, working at cross purposes. Maya watched for exactly 17 seconds, assessing the situation. The station shuddered as another shroud attack hit home. Emergency lights flickered. "Engineering reports critical damage to power distribution systems," announced the station eye, its voice eerily calm. "Estimated time to complete failure, 15 minutes. Maya pushed through the crowd, climbing onto a raised platform to be seen. "Listen to me," she shouted over the noise. "The station's main power core is destabilizing. We need a new approach." "What would a human know of?" began a Vazrian commander, scales flaring in anger. Enough. It was the officer who had humiliated Maya during her first day on the station. He stepped forward, surprising everyone. "Let her speak." Maya nodded thanks and quickly took control of the main display. "The shroud technology isn't attacking our weapons or shields directly. It's disrupting the command pathways between systems." She highlighted critical junction points. "We need to bypass the automated systems and manually control essential functions." The room fell silent as species looked at each other in confusion. "That's impossible," said a Moltarian engineer. "The systems are too complex to control manually." "Then we simplify," Maya replied. "We don't need all systems, just life support, basic shields, and communications." She quickly organized teams, assigning tasks based on species' natural abilities rather than rank. She sent crystalline Peltorians to reinforce vulnerable areas, their bodies naturally resistant to radiation. Vapor-breathing Makari were dispatched to navigate smoke-filled corridors without protection gear. Humans were assigned to improvise solutions where standard procedures failed. "The Arvani can communicate telepathically. They'll be our backup communications network if systems fail completely," Maya explained. "Crix, your natural electrical resistance, makes you ideal for working with damaged power systems." "This isn't protocol," objected an older Felrani. "There are established procedures. Your procedures assume your technology works." Maya interrupted. "Right now, it doesn't." Another explosion rocked the station. Emergency barriers closed off an entire section as atmosphere vented into space. 63 lives lost in Sector 12, reported the AI dispassionately. Maya grabbed a toolkit and headed toward the door. "I'm going to engineering. We need to manually reroute power from the auxiliary cores. That area is highly radioactive now," warned the Vazrian officer who had supported her. "The shielding is compromised." "Humans don't follow the rules because sometimes the rules don't work," she explained, leading by example as the station shuddered around them. "We adapt." To everyone's surprise, the Vazrian grabbed his own equipment. "I will accompany you." More volunteers stepped forward. A Crix engineer, 2 Makari technicians, even a Felrani medical officer. Maya nodded gratefully. "Move quickly, and don't wait for permission to solve problems you encounter. Trust your instincts." Throughout the station, similar scenes unfolded as species that had barely cooperated before now worked side by side. Peltorians used their crystalline bodies to block radiation leaks while Moltarians repaired critical systems. Arvani telepaths coordinated rescue efforts when communication systems failed. Humans taught other species improvisational repair techniques never found in any manual. For the first time, species worked not as separate entities, but as one unified force. In engineering, Maya and her team fought through intense heat and radiation to reach the auxiliary control systems. The Vazrian officer, despite his earlier prejudice, proved to be a skilled technician and reliable partner in crisis. The Shroud are targeting our reactor network specifically, he noted as they worked. They've studied our technology. Yes, Maya agreed, but they haven't studied us, the people inside the technology. She reconnected a vital power coupling by hand, her protective gloves smoking from the heat. That's their mistake. As they worked frantically to save the station, the diverse team began to function with surprising harmony. When one species faltered, another stepped in with their unique abilities. What began as desperate improvisation slowly transformed into something new, a unified response that no single species could have accomplished alone. And against all expectations, Unity Station began to fight back. The emergency teams had managed to stabilize most of Unity Station's critical systems, but the central power core remained a serious problem. Without it, life support would fail within hours. The command center had been transformed into a makeshift crisis room, with representatives from each species working together under Maya's leadership. A weary Crix engineer stumbled in from the core access corridor. 2 of his 6 limbs were bandaged where radiation burns had damaged his exoskeleton. "The core stabilizers are completely destroyed," reported the technician. "Someone must enter and manually reset the system." Silence fell over the command center. Even the constant alarms seemed to quiet for a moment as everyone processed this information. "The radiation will be fatal," someone whispered, "even with protection gear." Maya studied the station schematics displayed on the main screen. The core chamber was flooded with deadly radiation levels that would kill most species within minutes. The automated systems designed to handle such emergencies had been the first targets of the Shroud attack. How long would someone need to survive to complete the reset? Maya asked. 4 minutes minimum, replied the station's chief engineer. A Moltarian whose normally bright orange skin had dulled with exhaustion. But it's pointless to discuss. No one could survive that radiation long enough to finish the job. The Vazrian officer who had once mocked Maya stepped forward. His name, she had learned, was Commander Tarzik. During the crisis, he had proven himself capable and brave, working alongside humans without complaint. "I will go," Tarzik announced. "Vazrian biology is more resistant to radiation than most species. I might last long enough." "You'll die," the Moltarian stated bluntly. Tarzik straightened to his full height. "It is a worthy death. Our histories will remember it." Maya blocked his path as he moved toward the core access door. "No, there's another way." The room watched as she crossed to a storage compartment and entered her personal access code. The door slid open to reveal what looked like a bulky, outdated spacesuit. "What is that ancient thing?" asked a Felrani scientist. "A human-designed radiation suit," Maya explained. "Our latest model." Several aliens exchanged doubtful glances. The suit looked primitive compared to their sleek technologies. Bulky and inelegant, with visible seams and heavy material. "Our scientists reviewed human protection gear last year," said the Moltarian engineer dismissively. "It was deemed insufficient for extreme radiation environments." Maya began putting on the suit anyway. "Your scientists measured it against different standards. This was designed specifically for reactor core emergencies." "This won't work," the Vazrian argued. "The radiation levels are too extreme." "It doesn't need to work perfectly," Maya replied, securing the chest piece. "It just needs to work long enough." She checked the suit's oxygen supply and systems readouts displayed on a simple wrist panel. 4 minutes, maybe 5. That should be enough time. The Vazrian studied her face through the clear helmet visor. "Why would you risk yourself after how I treated you? I publicly humiliated you when you first arrived." Maya paused in her preparations. The command center had gone quiet, everyone listening to this unexpected conversation. "Because that's what humans do," Maya said simply. "We protect even those who don't like us." She finished sealing the helmet and activated the suit's power system. A soft hum indicated that the radiation shielding was functioning. "Besides," she added, "you're one of the best engineers on this station. If I fail, they'll need you for Plan B." To everyone's surprise, Tarzik moved toward another storage locker and pulled out a second radiation suit. This one was clearly Vazrian in design, with different proportions and configuration. "If you're going in there, you'll need someone who understands the core systems," he said, beginning to put on the suit. "And Vazrian suits may be less effective than yours against radiation, but they're better than nothing." Maya considered arguing, but recognized the logic. Two people working together could complete the reset in half the time. "Exactly," Tarzik said. "Double the chance of success." The chief engineer approached them with data tablets. "Here are the bypass codes you'll need. The primary control panels are likely melted, so you'll need to access the manual override circuits behind the northeast panel." Maya and Tarzik studied the information as the Vazrian finished putting on his protective gear. "Your suit will begin to fail after approximately 3 minutes," warned a Crick scientist. "The radiation will penetrate gradually after that." "Then we'll work fast," Maya replied. Together, they walked to the heavy blast door that sealed off the core chamber. Station personnel lined the corridor, watching silently as Human and Vazrian prepared to enter what might be their tomb. The chief engineer operated the door controls. "The inner chamber can only be opened manually from inside the access corridor. Once you're in, you're committed." Maya nodded. "Understood." Tarzik looked at Maya. "Admiral Chen, I must formally apologize for—" "Save it for when we get back," Maya interrupted with a small smile. "Consider it motivation to survive." The blast door opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Together, they entered the access corridor, the door sealing behind them with a heavy thud. The corridor itself was dimly lit by emergency lighting. At the end was another door, this one leading directly to the core chamber. Already, their suit radiation sensors were detecting dangerous levels, and they hadn't even entered the main chamber yet. "Ready?" Maya asked. Tarzik nodded. "For Unity Station." "For all species," Maya added. Together, they entered the core, Human and Vazrian working as one, racing against time as the station's systems failed around them. The chamber beyond was bathed in an eerie blue glow, the massive power core at its center pulsing with unstable energy. Damaged control panels sparked along the walls, and loose cables dangled from the ceiling. They moved quickly to the northeast wall, radiation alarms already blaring in their suits. The timer on Maya's wrist display began counting down their estimated safe exposure time. 5 minutes to save the station. 4 minutes before their protection began to fail. The race against death had begun. In the command center, the mood had shifted from desperate hope to silent resignation. 3 minutes had passed since Admiral Chen and Commander Tarzik had entered the core. The radiation monitoring system showed levels that no living being should be able to survive. Most species had gathered in small groups, some performing their equivalent of prayer. "They should have succeeded or failed by now," whispered the Moltarian chief engineer. "The systems would have restarted if—" The lights flickered suddenly, dimming completely for 2 seconds. Screens went black. In the darkness, someone gasped. Then, like a wave spreading outward, the station lights flickered and then blazed to full power. Screens reactivated, showing system after system returning to normal operation. Cheers erupted throughout Unity as systems came back online. "Core stability restored," announced a technician in disbelief. "Power levels normalizing across all sectors." "What about Admiral Chen and Commander Tarzik?" asked a human officer, pushing forward through the celebrating crowd. The question sobered the room. Given the radiation levels, their survival seemed impossible. "Scanning core access corridor," said a Crix, working quickly at a console. No life signs detected. The celebrations quieted. Then a voice came through the communication system, weak but clear. "Command Center, this is Chen. We're in the emergency decontamination chamber. Could use some medical assistance." Fresh cheers broke out as a medical team rushed toward the core access area. 20 minutes later, Maya and the Vazrian officer emerged from the decontamination chamber, both alive though clearly weakened. They leaned on each other for support as they walked, an unexpected sight. human and Vazrian physically supporting one another. Their suits must have provided more protection than we thought possible, murmured a Felrani scientist in amazement. Not exactly, Maya explained, wincing as a medic treated a radiation burn on her arm. We realized the manual override was too damaged to work directly, so we cross-wired components from both our suits to create a remote activation device. We each sacrificed part of our protection to create the tool we needed, Tarzik added. Human ingenuity, Vazrian technical knowledge. You deliberately exposed yourselves to increased radiation, asked the Multarian engineer, horrified. Maya nodded. It was the only way to complete the mission without either of us receiving a lethal dose. By sharing the exposure and combining our equipment, we both had a chance to survive. Their combined approach, human ingenuity and Vazrian technical knowledge, had succeeded where either alone would have failed. Many species in the room looked at each other with new understanding. What other combinations of their unique abilities might prove greater than the sum of their parts? A Krix communications officer chittered excitedly from a nearby console. The shroud vessels are moving away from the station. They're retreating at high speed. Track them, ordered the chief commander. Already done, the officer replied. And there's more. During the battle, our modified sensor array captured their signal patterns. We have their communication frequencies. Maya smiled tiredly from the medical bed where she was receiving treatment. For centuries, the Coalition had fought the Shroud without understanding them, without even knowing what they looked like or why they attacked. Now they had hope of finally communicating with, or at least tracking, their mysterious enemy. Get that data to research immediately, Maya instructed, and share it with all Coalition worlds. If they attack anywhere else, we'll be ready. Later that day, after receiving treatment for radiation exposure, Maya stood at a viewport watching repair teams work on Unity Station's exterior. The Shroud attack had left visible scars on the once pristine structure, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Commander Tarzik approaching. He had been treated as well, though his scales still looked paler than normal. The Vazrian officer stopped before her, then formally lowered his head in the highest sign of respect in Vazrian culture. I was wrong about humans, he admitted publicly, other species gathering around to listen. Your species sees solutions where we see only problems. You ignore boundaries that we consider fixed. You question what we accept without thought. Maya nodded, accepting his words. That's why we belong here, she replied. Not because we're advanced, but because we're different. The galaxy doesn't need more of the same. It needs new perspectives. In the days that followed, species that had barely acknowledged humans before now sought their input on problems that had remained unsolved for generations. Human adaptability and creativity, qualities once dismissed as primitive by more technologically advanced species, were suddenly in high demand. 1 month later, Admiral Chen stood before the Coalition Council in their Grand Assembly Hall. Representatives from all member species were present for this historic session. The vote was about to take place on a proposal to integrate humans more fully into the Coalition's command structure. The proposal to place human officers in key leadership positions throughout our fleet has been submitted, announced the Council Elder. We will now vote. One by one, species representatives registered their votes. To Maya's astonishment, the result was unanimous in favor. Even the Vazrian delegation, traditionally the most conservative about change, had voted to support human leadership. The Council Elder, whose crystalline form had witnessed centuries of galactic history, turned toward Maya. Perhaps, the Council Elder said thoughtfully, humans weren't late to join us. Perhaps they arrived exactly when the galaxy needed them most. The words hung in the air, pregnant with meaning. For the first time since joining the Coalition, humans were seen not as newcomers to be tolerated, but as essential partners in a shared future. Maya looked out at the assembled species, no longer aliens but colleagues. She thought about the challenges they had overcome together and those that still lay ahead. The Shroud would return. Other threats would emerge. The hardest challenges still lay ahead, but for the first time, they would face them together. As the session ended, Commander Tarzik approached her with a data tablet. "The combined science team has decoded the first shroud transmissions," he said, excitement evident in his voice. "They're not what we expected." Maya looked at the information, her eyes widening. "This changes everything we thought we knew." "Indeed," Tarzik agreed. "And who better to lead us into this new understanding than humanity? You've made a habit of changing how we see the universe." Maya nodded, already planning their next steps. Unity Station had lived up to its name at last, not through grand ideals or lofty speeches, but through crisis and sacrifice, where true unity is always born. Together, they walked toward the future, no longer divided by species or history, but united by something far stronger: shared purpose, mutual respect, and the promise of what they might become together.